So I'm wearing mushroom socks, and they mean a lot to me because I just love mushrooms and I love sharing them. So the more conversation pieces I can have is good for me. So this is a mushroom fairy, and I like to kind of say that I'm the mushroom fairy because I'm just always like growing them, and they just grow very easily for me somehow. So I've been growing mushrooms for about 4 years, and I absolutely love it. I'm also kind of studying shamanism, so I'm diving more into like the healing aspect of mushrooms. Growing mushrooms is so much different than plants. It's a lot different, and you do need to be cleanly, right? And there has been a sense over the years that I've noticed you need to be even cleanly, like in your mind and your soul. And so I love the correlation of, you know, the spirituality of it. And when they do grow, it is almost like magic, right? Whether it's psilocybin or lion's mane or different like oyster mushrooms, it's just so magical because they aren't there, and then all of a sudden they're there, and they're harvested a lot quicker than actual plants. So that's one thing I really love about it, because it's just so magical. The way I have it set up is in my master bedroom. I've dedicated the whole master bedroom, but you walk in, and to the right I have different shelves just with like mushroom like stuff that I use. I also make chocolate, so I have chocolate products. And then towards the left I have like a big deep freeze where I keep all of the mushrooms in there so that they hold potency. And then if you keep going, I have a big grow tent. The big grow tent is like the dark room where you put like your jars, where you have your grain or your corn to turn into mycelium essentially. And then like it's probably by like a 3 by 9 feet grow tent, so it's pretty big. And then there's like little totes. So there's totes where you put the process from the grain into substrate. So there's like totes where it's in the dark room, and once they're completely white, which is when they're completely all mycelium, you can take them out. So then from there I have another shelf to the left of it, of the grow tent, where all of the bags and the totes get to fruit and like daylight. So yeah, I have like step-by-step process of, you know, when it gets first inoculated, it goes into that dark room, and then if it's getting fruited, it's in the other like shelving area. And then I have a little fruiting room right next to the shelving area, and the fruiting room pretty much provides like moisture to the mushrooms so that they can fruit. One thing I recommend for starting to grow is not having such high expectation that you are going to get a mushroom right off the bat. And honestly, the biggest thing I recommend is more like the more number of things you have, the more grow bags you have, the more success you're going to have. So the kind of idea is a lot of people get one grow kit, and then they expect so much from one grow kit. And my recommendation is, hey, get like 3 grow kits from me, so that you do have a more likelihood to grow mushrooms. So a big thing is patience and having lower expectations of getting the growth, but also there's a power in numbers. So if you have a little bit more, I guarantee you're going to get some mushrooms. And another big thing is, you know, really finding the space that's clean for it is super important. So dedicating maybe like a closet in the beginning to your mushrooms, and just also letting them be. A lot of people I've noticed, I'll give them grow kits and they'll just go and mess with it every day. And when they're in a dark room, they have to be in there at least a couple weeks. And the less you mess with it, you know, the better. You want to check on it maybe once a week, but you know, obviously keeping up with it is good, but every day is also not as good, because then you're adding more dust, more like risk of contamination. And that's the big thing with mushroom growing is contamination. My personal favorite is ape. That stands for albino penis envy. That strain is 2 to 3 times more potent than the regular psilocybin strain. So the ones that drop spores, they're just like regular ones. They're easier to grow. These do not drop spores. So you essentially have to take a piece of this mushroom and clone it. But basically with the growing cycle with it is a little different than regular mushrooms, and they're a little bit more alien-like looking. So when they do grow, they do look a little bit like smaller and than like bigger mushrooms, but they're a lot more potent, like I said. And they have blue caps. So the blue caps, they turn completely blue compared to other ones that are like brown, and they're almost like alien-like. Like they're alien looking to me, but they're definitely like a baby. And it's very interesting because during the growing process, it takes, maybe like a week for them to get fully fruited. But it's definitely like a time, like you have to know, like in an inner knowing of when to pick it or not. There is another thing, if you don't pick it soon enough, there will be mold potentially in your tote. So there is just a very specific time with when to cultivate the mushroom, and specifically these ones because they're harder to grow, they're slower, and they're more at risk of contamination. Yeah, well, there's penis envy, and then there's the albino penis envy, and the albino is like it's a mutation of penis envy. So essentially it was a mutation and was cloned and turned into ape. So the effects are different than penis envy. Penis envy are a lot headier. That's kind of just like my description. I think they're a lot more like will bring up problems. Like if you have a problem in your life, it's going to magnify that. And with albino penis envy, I've noticed that, or even had someone describe it this way, that even if you're having a bad day, it's a good day. So it's almost like the ego death is a little bit less intense, and it's a little bit more calming than the penis envy strain. So the mutation of the albino is that it is white and it's blue. The penis envy is brown, but penis envy does not drop spores. So those are also, you have to clone them in a different process. And there are certain strains that do drop more spores than others. And that's what I've noticed. I've grown a lot of different strains, and some like drop like crazy and some don't. Or sometimes it might be the batch. So every batch is different depending on how you inoculated it with your substrate and your grain. Maybe you have more contam or breathing into it, there was more dust. So there's just like, they all grow so different. Unpacking like the thought that you need to be spiritually and mentally cleansed is the idea of like, if you do have a lot going on in your life and you aren't very aware, you might make a mistake, or you might put that energy into the tote when you're inoculating it. I've noticed when I've been in a bad spot, or a bad spot with, someone who's helping me grow, it didn't grow as well as when I am having, that vibration of like higher vibration of being, happy, or being aware, or feeling safe, or any of those kind of things. So I notice also it's my awareness that increases of what the tote wants. What does the mushroom want? And it's also like a connection. Everyone says, oh, well, you need these amount of droplets so that it fruits, right? Or you don't, or you need to fan it, or and sometimes it's just like an inner knowing for me. So I feel like if I'm more connected with my spirituality and I'm working on my mental health, I kind of know what this tote or this mushroom bag might need to continue to grow, because I am more connected to like the mushroom spirit. The person who got me into growing was one of my past partners. He was seeking help for his depression, and he would go away on jobs for a while, and so he just went crazy. So he went crazy on growing and did a bunch of like substrate and totes and left for work, and I basically got stuck with fruiting them and fanning them and taking care of them. And I had like maybe 13 totes and he was gone, and I was just like picking like stacks of mushrooms. And at that time I had just moved to Denver. I was working downtown at a bar, and I was an alcoholic. I was drinking about 4 to 5 times a week. Naturally, because, you know, I was also working at a bar, but it was also very stressful to move to Denver because of the lack of money that I made. And also I was drinking so much, and I always wanted to like quit drinking, take control of my health. So I'd heard microdosing had help people get off of alcoholism and like addiction. So I immediately started microdosing, made my own little capsules, and the first 2 microdoses, it didn't go well with my stomach. And most people will be like, oh, well, it's the mushrooms that mess up my stomach. And for me, it was more of like a communication from like the mushroom spirit that I needed to quit drinking and that I needed to change my diet, because I was eating pizza, eating pretty much just really a crappy diet and drinking. And of course I'm not gonna like be able to go to the bathroom well. And so I quit cold turkey for 1.5 years and got really into mushrooms, and just was like, this is it. This is my passion to continue to heal myself and help others as well. So that was like a huge key factor. And also just seeing how they grew, I was just like, I want to keep doing this. It's so magical, and I just felt so right with me. So yeah, I just kind of developed this huge passion to help people. I had heard that between like 100 milligrams to 300 milligrams is what I originally had heard is a microdose. That could be like 0.1 to 0.3, and other, you know, gram terminology. But I just kind of was like, you know, I'm gonna start with 200 milligrams. And I did a blend of, I think it was reishi at the time, lion's mane, and the psilocybin. So I started with the 200 milligrams, and it seemed to do me well because I kind of was able to feel a little bit of, the effects, because sometimes when you're in the lower dose, you don't feel as much. And I wanted to feel the effects, but not too much. I also know like everyone's biochemistry is different, and it can have different effects. You might have a higher tolerance or lower tolerance. I'm kind of like in the middle. So I started doing that dosage. And another thing I had heard or like read during my research was to take 1 to 3 days off in between dosages. And so I would follow, I didn't follow a strict schedule. It was more of like how it was needed. So I just started a journal. I would track when I was doing it. And I would, originally it was like probably I was microdosing 3 times a week. There were days where I would take off, days, and then other days I would do like 4 times in a row and take a week off. But with taking those breaks, my tolerance hasn't increased, so I really haven't had to change the dosage. If anything, now I might take a lower dose. I might take 120 milligrams, which is the suggested clinical dose from what I've read. So now I even take a lower dose, so I'm not feeling completely out of it. I can still function, I can still go about my day, and that's how I've kind of been able to not develop a tolerance. So yeah, my tolerance is pretty much the same now. And now I almost don't need to microdose as much because I feel like it has rewired my brain. It has changed me. So I take more functional mushrooms now that help me day to day. And I probably microdose maybe 1 to 3 times a month, comparatively to, the 3 times a week. So that's the beauty of it for me, is that it really seemed to work, and now I don't need it every day, right? As opposed to antidepressants where you do need them all the time. So a micro is pretty much under a half gram. So you're just getting more of like a mood elevation, but you're not having a full psychedelic trip. Or you're having visuals. You might have a little bit of visuals on a half gram, but once you're about a gram and up, you're doing a macro dose where you are having more visuals, you are having kind of like an ego death, And so I have experienced macrodosing as well. I would do maybe like once a month or once every 2 months with a macrodose, 1 to 2 grams, and that was very effective, like as a reset comparatively to a microdose. But a macro you have to prepare for, right? And a micro is more like, it's more of like a daily thing, and you know, you can integrate it in your daily routine and also do like intention setting and journaling, but it's not as much preparation, or you're not out for the whole day comparatively with a macrodose. So microdosing changed me in a way where it allowed me to be who I really wanted to be. I've always wanted to be into wellness and quit drinking and take control of my health and be more of like a health coach. And I always struggled with addiction. I struggled with trauma. And with microdosing, when I started doing it, it allowed me to sit with my feelings and really not numb them. So I was no longer numbing them with alcohol. I was able to sit with what was going on internally and able to work through that. So I worked through that physically with like more workouts, more yoga, but I also worked with it mentally. I did more of my affirmations, my gratitude journal, and it really allowed me to shift my perspective on who I was. As opposed to just feeling stuck, right? And it was very, very uncomfortable, I will say, for the first year. There was a lot of uncomfortable things that came up that I had to process, that I had to deal with, whether it was like child trauma or, you know, childhood trauma, or like relationship trauma, or all these things of, you know, my career choices. But I realized that for once in my life, I could sit with what I wanted to change and that I had the ability to change it. So it really allowed me to see myself differently and do the work and feel the things that I needed to feel. Because I think a lot of the times we want to not feel those things, numb things, and just find other things to fill that, you know, void inside. Recently, I did a smaller microdose. I did about 120 milligrams, and I get a little nervous still before I microdose, to be honest, even though I've done it for a while. I think that's definitely like what I explain as the ego death. The ego just was resisting, right? And I did a microdose, and it just completely elevated my mood for the day. I've just recently been going through a lot of different transitions in my life and feeling like I'm not making the right choice. And I'm kind of branching out from, you know, a past relationship, and it made me feel very grounded. And I was nervous it was gonna make me feel very emotional, and instead it made me feel grounded in my choice and decision, and also just like shift my perspective and take my mind off of like some of the pain, and just understand that, you know, it's time for me to let go of some things, right? Some things that no longer serve me. So it was a really good experience because it's not much, but it just gave me exactly what I needed, as opposed to going in a little bit higher microdose or a macrodose. I just felt very like I was able to release what I no longer wanted, and it was also kind of working in my brain to shift my perspective on myself, you know, and knowing that I have the choice in my life of who to choose in my life and what I want in my life. A lot of times we get stuck in thinking that we need certain people or career choices in our lives, when if it doesn't feel right, we're able to let go. So it really would say that it recently allowed me to let go what I know that is no longer serving me. There's some preparation beforehand. A big thing I talk about is diet. What are you eating like a few days before? Because that can interfere with how you feel even in your gut. And also adding different compounds, the psilocybin can help that irritation. Psilocybin on its own will irritate your gut, but if you add like honey or citrus or even cacao, that can help the stomach ache. So I definitely like try to eat as clean as you can for the first like few days. Prepare whether it's a micro or macrodose. Definitely if you're macrodosing, I would definitely be more strict on the diet. Micro isn't as like, it doesn't hurt as bad, but I would definitely check in with yourself mentally as well. Where are you mentally? If you are having like a high anxiety day, high depression day, I don't suggest like doing it that day, right? Knowing that you kind of have a medium tolerable day is better to take a micro dose or a macro dose because for me, it seems like it magnifies whatever's going on. So if I'm super stressed out that day and I take a microdose, it's gonna magnify that. But if I'm more manageable, I'm able to understand what the medicine's trying to tell me. Another huge thing that I think is really important is setting intentions before you microdose or macrodose. I always journal, pretty much always now. I didn't for a while, but I noticed how much it helps beforehand to microdose and put the intentions and say, say you're dealing with a lot of depression. I kind of set and put out affirmations that will help with that depressive, mentality. So I'll say during this microdose, I am happy, I will be happy, or I'll be at ease, and the medicine will communicate with me, this way. So kind of trying to counteract whatever's going on. And I've noticed that's really helped my experience because I've set that intention before. I think sometimes we ingest a lot of things kind of like mindlessly, and really taking that time to go inward and knowing what you're using it for is important, right? So definitely setting intentions beforehand. And I like to do like a little cleansing. So like if you have some Sao Paulo or some Florida water, you can get together with your friend and do it together and like cleanse it together. And I think it's just so much more powerful that way. Also being very aware where you're at in your environment where you're going to do this. So I would suggest being comfortable in the environment that you're going to do it, as well as the person, if you are going to do it with someone, being very comfortable with that person definitely helps the experience, because if you don't know your environment, don't know your people, that's gonna bring up a lot of things, and that can also be very uncomfortable for your healing journey, or even your experience. I think sometimes it's not all about healing, sometimes it can be fun, right? So almost subconsciously I've used it in some ways. I used it mainly for addiction, and then I realized that through using it through addiction, it was actually me dealing with my trauma. So I've definitely gone into it intentionally to maybe go through some of my childhood trauma and some of the patterns that I've created from my childhood that I attract in my personal life, whether it be my friends or my relationships. I've realized I have attracted these things, and I've gone and use it intentionally a couple times to be able to break that pattern, to recognize that pattern, and do some of that work as well. So integration is probably one of the most important parts besides intention setting. So integration is always going back. So I always tell people, or I like to personally go back after my microdose or after my macrodose and write down how I felt and how maybe those intentions I was able to connect to. So I always go back, and I like to do pre-journaling and then after journaling, so that I know also oh, maybe this dose doesn't work very well in this time. Maybe this dose works better in other times, right? So I think that's super important to go back, and because also when you are also in a microdose, or especially a macrodose, you might have all these ideas of I'm gonna live this way, I'm gonna live that way. And then it's almost you feel great, but then you forget and you don't do that work. So for me, it's super important to go back and say, hey, this is what I got from this medicine has taught me or told me or communicated with me. And I'm going to make sure that I go back, reflect, and actually do that work that I got, that the medicine told me to do. And in many cases, like I've said before, is when I first started microdosing, and told me to quit drinking. So that's what I did. I was that I'm gonna listen and do that integration. And it might be tough, you know, to do some of those things, but I think that's the most important part. And maybe also having an accountability partner is important too. If there's something you want to change or fix and that dose told you to fix something, checking in with a friend or someone you trust and say, hey, this is something I want to change. Will you please hold me accountable? Because we can't do it on our own. You know, we can't hold ourselves accountable, and it takes a community to, you know, do a lot of these things. So that's a big thing I also recommend. I have heard it quite often, it being termed as a drug. Of course, you know, it's recognized federally as that, which I understand. But personally, I think that it is a medicine. It grows naturally, and it's just how we view it. So every time someone does say, oh, well, I'm gonna trip, or, you know, I really like to get away from that word of tripping because of the way we've used this medicine. It's been used for parties, going to shows, and my big thing is trying to educate people to understand that it's not just for fun, and it's not just for that intention. It's been shown that way, but I think in my mind it is a medicine, and I really like to I do correct people quite often saying, hey, you know, it is recognized as that, but you need to understand it's different than LSD. Like, LSD is synthesized and it does derive from something natural like ergot, but it is not natural, and so the effects are different. And understanding that mushrooms are there to heal us. So I really like to just tell people, hey, this is a healing, this is a healing modality. It can be used for fun, but understanding to respect it, and we haven't been educated to respect these plant medicines. So I'm definitely always I do correct people quite often. Psilocybin is decriminalized in the whole state, and there are other plant medicines as well that have been decriminalized, which I believe ibogaine and San Pedro or mescaline cactus, as well as psilocybin. And the way that I know what is going on is that it is legal to grow, cultivate, and it is also legal to gift. So the way I kind of navigate that is I gift people the medicine, because that's what it is, what is legal, and I just like to educate people. So typically people are reimbursing me for my service or my education, and I also work a lot with functional mushrooms as well. So typically it's I try to get people more into the functional mushrooms and just have the other stuff as more as a gift. So also that's something that I think is really great, because gifts are nice, and gifting medicine feels really uplifting for me. Functional mushrooms are non-psychoactive. That's pretty much the word they're using a lot more. There was medicinal mushrooms. I kind of steered away because now they are using medicinal for psilocybin. So functional mushrooms are safe to eat every day. You're not going to have a psychedelic effect at all, or a trip with it. So those are completely legal, and those are good for your so many different things. So brain health, memory, anti-inflammation, anti-cancer. They're also really great for just focus and sports performance. So there's so many great benefits with functional mushrooms. And then psilocybin is psychoactive, and that is the compound that is decriminalized in this state, but very different between psilocybin mushrooms and functional mushrooms. I'm half Hispanic, and I'm a quarter Italian, and just a quarter white, whatever that is, melting pot. But I would definitely say I identify more as Hispanic, and it's definitely something that I feel a lot of people think did kind of originate from South America or Mexico and these areas. So I have been, stigmatized in some ways, maybe negatively, or been called certain things, but I realized that I embrace that of me, because I think that that's what's called me more to this medicine, is my ethnicity, and maybe even like a past life or a past ancestor where maybe they did work with this medicine, and instead of taking the stigma so negatively, I try to recently embrace it more and embrace my culture and try to integrate it into the medicine that I use, because I also work with cacao. So that's a big one, you know, that originated from the Mayans and the Aztecs. So if anything, if people do make fun of me or stigmatize me, I just kind of take it in stride and just know maybe that person's dealing with something, or jealousy can come up a lot too, and that's just my honest opinion. And I used to be very ashamed that I was Hispanic and I didn't embrace my roots, and if anything, this medicine has allowed me to embrace it more and want to know more about my culture and how we use different plant medicines, and not even just mushrooms, like cacao and all kinds of other things like peyote and San Pedro. So a huge concern with psilocybin specifically is that they want to synthesize it. So when it is being administered in facilitation, wellness centers, it will be synthesized, and it's still a gray area of what exactly they're going to be able to give in the wellness center. So that is a concern of it being synthesized for me, because for me, I think that mushroom does have a spirit and it has to be respected, and I am concerned that it will become more getting away from what it actually is. So I know that a lot of people, especially people who are very wealthy, do want to get their hands in this medicine, not even knowing, what the different effects synthesized form will be compared to the natural organic way, which I understand that with the synthesized version, you can know and control how much it actually, psilocin is in it comparatively with natural mushrooms. However, there are ways to test natural mushrooms and know how much psilocin is in it, and that is a huge concern. So I am hoping that it does not go in that direction so badly. I hope that the wellness centers in the future, from what I know, is that there will be wellness centers coming hopefully out in 2024, or there will be more guidelines of how that will go about. And I'm hoping that the wellness centers are going to provide natural psilocybin as opposed to synthesized. I'm not super concerned that there are people wanting to make money off of it, because I think there's opportunity for everybody. But I think that it is important for people like me or other people to be well-versed and know how to educate people, and maybe even educate these people, these higher up people wanting to invest in this type of medicine. But I see it kind of going similarly like weed did or marijuana did. So yeah, I'm just crossing my fingers that we're still gonna remain as natural as possible, because I do think that synthesized is a way different effect. I've heard that it isn't very similar to the natural form of mushrooms. So yeah, that's my big hope. I think that people with color in Colorado definitely need access to this kind of medicine because of the oppression and the stigma that is put on people of color. And I think that it's such a healing medicine that'll help these people kind of overcome that oppression and hopefully be able to embrace their culture as opposed to being ashamed, which was in my experience. I've been slightly ashamed of being Hispanic or being different, and now it's helped me to embrace my culture. And I hope that the culture is not lost with plant medicines, is not lost with certain practices. So it is a huge hope that it is accessible to people of color so that they can heal and maybe even provide and contribute to the community. If I could talk to mushrooms, I would thank them and just show them gratitude. And I do actually try to talk to them every morning. It's kind of like my little ritual to go check on my mushrooms and just kind of send this loving energy to them and thank them. And especially is a huge one I ask quite often is, what is the mushroom trying to communicate to me? What can I do to serve the spirit or the spirit of the mushroom to continue to grow and spread like healing to the world? So it's a big one.